آل قرآني حفظتم آي رحماني وفضلتم تلاوته.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to each and one of you, and jazakallah khair for your patience. Subhanallah, it has been a long drive for me. I left very early today in order to be here before Maghrib, but well, the plan was different. Luton is very busy. So alhamdulillah, anyway, here I am now. Jazakallah khair for coming. For the sisters as well, I want to say one important thing, that whenever there is something that you sisters need to ask or want to say, how do you normally operate with the sisters? Do they give through a written letter or a slip? Okay. The way I do it normally is I actually want to have an interaction with the audience. Okay. I don't wait too long for you at the end to have the Q&A session, which is the traditional way. But I still would like to answer some questions when I ask you some questions, and I want to make it more interactive. Okay, inshallah, at least with the brothers here, and inshallah the sisters then give through the slip whoever wants to ask something at the end. Now we will have until Isha, inshallah, and without further ado, we're going to start straight away. Now I could clearly see, mashallah, a lot of young brothers involved, and a lot of young brothers are here, hopefully also young sisters, and this is very, very, very important. Because we're going to discuss something which is normally not discussed, especially in the mosque areas, in the da'wah centers, in the da'wah activities. Normally, people are just focusing on Quran, on the Sunnah, and of course on the Bible. However, we have a problem. If we go to the da'wah stalls nowadays, and if we see what people come with, they're not really interested in what you have to tell them about the Quran, the Sunnah, or the Bible. People are interested in something totally different. They're coming and attacking you with history. They're coming and attacking you about what's happening around you. Look what's happening around us. Look in Afghanistan, look in Pakistan, look what the Muslims do here, look what the Muslims do there. And then you're standing, then you're telling me, yeah, but in the Quran, yeah, but they're telling you, I'm not interested in the Quran. Okay, but in the Bible, yeah, but you know what, I don't believe in the Bible, I don't care. So now you're standing there and you don't know what to say. They're telling you, look, isn't it like this, that your forefathers, your ancestors, your people went down to Jerusalem. They attacked Jerusalem. They attacked the Holy Land. They took it away from the Christians, right? So, the Crusaders were nothing else. They did nothing else but just defending themselves, getting back what was actually rightfully theirs. Right? And now you're standing there. You're thinking, what shall I say on something like that? Isn't it true that the Christians were there before the Muslims? Isn't it true that Europe as a continent is actually a Judeo-Christian continent? Correct? It's a Judeo-Christian civilization that we're living in. Right? Now, from Sweden all the way down to Greece, from Finland to Portugal, the entire continent is actually mainly Christian. Right? We're experiencing it now. Christmas is around us, coming upon us next week. Right? We see Christmas trees everywhere. So, what does Islam, what is the role of Islam in such a society? What is the role of Islam in Britain, for example? Not really a lot, right? Many of our parents or grandparents came in the 1960s and 70s to this country, and they settled here. And that's how Islam came to this country, right? Right? Wrong. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. If this was right what I just said, I didn't have to be sitting here and telling you something about Islam in Europe. Because Islam in Europe is much, much older than we just discussed. Much older than any one of us here sitting in this room. Much older than all of us together. The faith in the continent of Europe is as old as the faith itself. Now, what did I just now say? What is that? The faith of Islam. How old is Islam? Where are we now? Which age? Which year are we living in? 1441, which means the faith is more than 1400 years old. That means, according to what I just said, it's more than 1400 years a European faith. Now, try to explain what I just said. Any idea?
faith that Europe had was Islam.
Really?
Well, I'm just interpreting what he said.
Okay,
Faith
Jazakallah
of
khair.
Islam is as old as faith itself in Europe.
Okay.
It's equal, right?
Okay, let's stick to the system of Islam. The system, as we know it, of course, we can go back and say Adam alayhi salam was a Muslim. Okay, clear. That's not what I mean. I mean the system of Islam in itself is as old as the Islam outside of Europe, is as old as Islam in Europe itself. So, meaning 1400 years, and not just since the 1960s or 70s. Now, okay, who was the first Muslim to enter Europe? Your father, your parents, your grandparents? Who was the first Muslim to enter Europe? Hey, who's that? Who is Tariq bin Ziyad? Okay, where did he come from?
From Arab world.
He came from the Arab world, right? He was an Arab, right? And he came where to?
Gibraltar, present day.
Okay, it's called Gibraltar, this place. Where's Gibraltar? In the south of Spain, there's a very small, tiny place geographically, which belongs to Britain, guys. Gibraltar is still part of Britain, it's not Spain. And Gibraltar is called Gibraltar because of exactly Tariq bin Ziyad. Gibraltar, Tariq. What does it mean?
Mountain of Tariq.
The mountain, the hill, the rock of Tariq. Because if you look at Gibraltar, it's nothing else but a hill, a rock. And surrounding the rock, there are some residential buildings. That's all it is. It's a very tiny place. And Gibraltar indeed means the mountain, the rock, the hill of Tariq. That's where Tariq bin Ziyad, as first Muslim, not arrived, but settled. And from that time on, Islam had never left Europe again. Before Tariq bin Ziyad, there were other Muslims who had been in Europe as well. On islands, for example, that belong to Italy. There is an island in the year 700. So before Tariq bin Ziyad, 711, in the year 700, one island in the south of Italy, which we're going to check later, inshallah. But at this moment, just to get an idea, in the south of Italy, there is an island which is called Pantelleria. Pantelleria, a very Italian name, right? Wrong, it's not. It's as Italian as Gibraltar is English or Spanish. It's Arabic. Gibraltar is an Arabic term, Gibraltaric, and Pantelleria comes from Bint Arrir. Bint Arrir, the daughter of the wind. This tiny island is in the north of Tunisia, closer to North Africa than it is to Italy or to Europe. Unbelievable things. It's just the start we're discussing at this moment. So imagine we're talking about the 8th century, we're talking about 700, the year 700. This is when Islam definitely came.
Who was Tariq bin Ziyad?
Tariq bin Ziyad. Who was Tariq bin Ziyad? You said it actually. You said he was an Arab, right? He came from North Africa. Thank you for the input. You said he came from the Arab world, which is not entirely true. He came from North Africa. And Tariq bin Ziyad was not an Arab, as you said. He was a Berber. A Berber. He came from North Africa. The original people who were living in North Africa were not the Arabs. The Arabs came later. Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt. The Arabs came later. The people who were living in North Africa before, what did they call them? What do they still call them nowadays in English? Berbers. Berbers. These were the original people. Do you see the connection between another word and this word? Berber? Barbarian. Yes, the ancient Greeks used to call these people Berbers, barbarians. You know why the ancient Greeks used to call people actually barbarians? Anybody who was not Greek was called a barbarian by the ancient Greeks. You know why? Because var, I don't understand what they're saying. They were speaking a language which I don't understand. That means a Greek could not understand the language of the people who didn't speak Greek. So it sounded like var. So they became varvaros, barbarian. Okay? That's where this comes from. So anybody who was not part of the Hellenic, of the Greek-speaking world, later the Roman world, it became much bigger later, the Roman world, they all were called barbarians. Okay? So these people living in North Africa, Tariq bin Ziyad came from North Africa. He was not an Arab. He was a Berber, a person who originally came from Africa, North Africa, and he settled in Europe. He came over to Europe. He came here because he, of course, wanted to capture Europe, to open it to the rest of the world, and to enforce Islam upon the people living in Europe, right?
No.
No. Why did he come then to Europe? Because there was so much to gain in Spain that time. You know, the Costa Blanca, the Costa del Sol, you know, very nice places. Beach, palm trees, iced coffee, right? Why did Tariq bin Ziyad come? That time in 711 to Spain. Why? Yes. To make dawah to the 2-3 people who were living in Spain that time. There were a lot of people living at the time. It was nearly deserted. There was not a lot of people living in Spain that time. And in Europe, in Western Europe, Southwest Europe, which I'm going to show you later, inshallah, this whole area was not really populated. There was not a lot of culture. There was not a lot of civilization. So if you say that they came to spread the da'wah, that is an idea that many people have nowadays, but it's not true. Tariq bin Ziyad did not come for Islam here. He didn't come for the da'wah. He came for a very pragmatic reason. Any idea?
Trade.
No.
To defend their borders.
No.
Peace to make home.
He came for, yeah? To conquer? No, not at all. His idea was the following. There was a Rodrigo, there was a Spanish in the north of Morocco. There is a small place which is called Ceuta. And in this place, there was a prince who was ruling, a Spanish prince. And he wanted the throne of Madrid. He wanted the throne of Spain. So he went to the Muslims and he asked them to help him to get the throne in Spain. And for him, he would give them this small, tiny place in the north of Africa, which was the only place which was still not Muslim. So it was a deal which was for the Muslims more beneficial than it was for the Spaniards, or for the people at the time. There was no Spaniards at the time, for the Europeans. So they said, okay, we'll do that because we want the whole of Africa. That was more important than Europe. As I said, in Europe, there was not a lot to gain at the time. So they said, yes, you get Ceuta, you get the north of Africa. They said to him, to Rodrigo, yes, you get Madrid, you get Spain, and we get the north of Africa. Deal. So Tariq bin Ziyad was sent out to explore, to find out, how does it look over there? Indeed, is it as he told us that there are not many people, there's not a lot of resistance, can we deal with them? And when he arrived there, people who were living there begged him to stay there. Many of these people living in the Iberian Peninsula, in Spain and in Portugal at that time, they were Christians or Jews, and they actually begged Tariq bin Ziyad to stay there. Many of them accepted Islam. Many of them saw the beauty of Islam and the relief that they had, because the taxation system of the Muslims was much better than the taxation system of the people who were ruling them before. So Tariq bin Ziyad said, listen, I can't leave because this place with so many Muslims nowadays became Dar al-Islam. It became part of the Muslim world. So the idea of leaving and giving it to a non-Muslim went out of the window. They said, no, we have to stay here and protect our people now. Now we have people here. We have Muslims living in Spain. We didn't have this before. And these people who were living there they wanted him to stay there and to fight against the people who were actually ruling Spain, they were Germanic people, okay? They didn't belong there. They came from outside, from Central Europe. So that's why Tariq bin Ziyad stayed there and moved on even further into France. First thing that you see there, the slide that I show you. Does anybody know where this is and what this is? No? Yeah. It's not part of Madrid. It's further south. The Alhambra. Have you ever heard of the Alhambra? Alhambra in Arabic means the red one. That means it's glowing like a red castle or palace in the night. Okay? So this is what the Muslims created, or remnants or heritage of what the Muslims left behind in Spain. And this is in Granada, the city of Granada, which was the last city in Spain to fall to the Christians. Okay? So this is called the Alhambra. Look at this one here. This is one of the wonders of the world. Okay? I can't see it from here, but I hope you can see it, right? What does it show? Okay, gold pillars, absolutely great. This is exactly, that is indeed gold pillars. Yes, you can. Well, they're not made out of gold. They look like gold pillars, but they are pillars that show the might and the power of the Muslims of that time. A Muslim palace. Imagine that. Look at this. This is the outside. Okay, this is the palace that you can still go and visit nowadays in Spain. Okay, and this is the inside of a masjid, a mosque. The only mosque that still remains in the south of Spain from that time, La Mezquita in Cordoba. Cordoba used to be the capital of the Muslims in Spain. Cordoba, which nowadays is just a smaller city, insignificant. But that time it was the capital of the Muslims. There were more than 40 libraries in Cordoba. There was a time when the Muslims established there were street lights, street lamps. In Europe that time, especially in Central Europe, in Northern Europe, people did not even have canalization. They didn't have baths, they didn't have toilets, they didn't have, definitely no street lamps. They didn't have books, they didn't have libraries, they didn't have universities. Do you know that the first university in Europe was established in Cordoba, in Spain, by the Muslims, not by the Christians, by the Muslims? The first university in Europe by the Christians was established where? Do you know? Oxford and Cambridge? No, not at all. Oxford, Cambridge was established 200 years after the first university in Italy. And it was established in Italy because the Muslims were also in Italy. The Muslims brought universities to Europe because the very first university in the world, do you know where this was established? In Fez, in Morocco. By whom? By a Muslim woman. A Muslim woman established the first university in the world in Africa, in North Africa, in what is nowadays Morocco. And that was in 859. 200 years later, plus, 200 plus years later, actually, the first university in Christian Europe was established in Italy. And then another 200 years, Oxford and Cambridge in the 11th century. Imagine that. When Oxford and Cambridge was established, there was Islam already in Europe, in Africa, in Spain and in Portugal for more than 400 years. And that's what I meant before when I said that Islam came to Europe at the very, very beginning of its establishment. The very first 100 years of Islam, in the existence of Islam, was already an existing body, an existing faith in Europe. There were countries in Europe during the time of Al-Andalus, and that's what they called Spain and Portugal, when countries in Europe where there was no faith at all, not Christian faith, not even a faith at all, such as Hungary, for example, such as Czech Republic, for example, Poland, the north of Europe, Scandinavia, Sweden. These were countries that had no faith at all yet. Not that they were Christian countries, no. During the time of Al-Andalus, Islam had established itself in the southwestern part of Europe. But in many parts of Europe, there was not even Christian countries, not even there. Imagine that. So when they say first reaction, first argument, Islam came after Christianity to Europe, this is first not true. Second of all, if we go according to the logic of who was first here, then the Christians were definitely not the first ones to be in Europe. Who was there before the Christians? The Jews, of course. Of course, the Jews. So this logic, if you apply this logic to people coming and telling us, look, Islam came much later after Europe to this continent, so we have a bigger right on Europe than anybody else, then you just clearly slap gospel. You just tell them clearly, listen, this is not true. This is absolutely not true. The Jews were here before. The polytheists were here before the Jews. The Greek gods, the Greeks used to believe in gods, in many gods. And they were not Christians before. So the argument is not strong at all. Okay? So this is what certain parts of Spain look like. Now this one is a modern mosque in Portugal, in Lisbon. Portugal and Spain, they both belong to Al-Andalus. They were both part of Al-Andalus once. Okay? And they called it Al-Andalus. Any idea why the Muslims called this place Al-Andalus? Al-Andalus, Andal, Vandals. Have you ever heard of the Vandals? Vandalism. What is vandalism? Sorry, say that again? Vandalism is, yeah? For example, if you, So destruction, if you destroy something, if you break something, that's vandalism, right? And these people, these Vandals, that was a Germanic tribe. They were called Vandals. And they were very barbaric, okay? The civilization was not very advanced. They were not people who would sit down and read books. They were not people who would write books. They were not people who would have a high standard of civilization. So that's why this term comes nowadays in English. They say, this is vandalism, what people do. They destroy things. They destroy, as you said, put something on the wall. This is called vandalism, okay? So indeed, it goes back to that time. You see why history is important. We need to understand what has happened in history in order to understand what's happening around us nowadays, okay? So they're called Al-Andalus because of these people, Vandals. They used to rule they used to rule in Spain, in Portugal, and in North Africa. These Germanic tribes, the Vandals, they used to rule once there. So they just generalized them all, and they just called them all the land of the Vandals, Al-Andalus. Okay? Now, take a look at that. There is a fountain in Portugal. That's what the Muslims have left behind. When you go to Portugal nowadays, when you go to Spain nowadays, when you even go to Italy nowadays, you will find a lot of this Arab Islamic heritage, okay? So you will find a lot of this different type of heritage, and not only in the south of Europe, but we're busy with that at the moment, okay? Now look at this. This is the Iberian Peninsula. Al-Andalus, as you can see, that means Portugal and Spain, all the way in the south. Do you see the small place which is called Ceuta? C-E-U-T-A? This is the place where this Spanish Christian asked the Muslims to help him to get this place back to them and to give him basically Spain. Because that until nowadays even has remained Spanish. Until nowadays this place, although it's Morocco, until nowadays this very place belongs to Spain, still now, until nowadays. Okay? So there was a deal that time. The Christians said, of course, that the Muslims broke the deal, but as we said, Tariq bin Ziyad and the Muslims could not have left the Muslims who suddenly became, many of them in Spain, left them in the hands of non-Muslims because it became Dar al-Islam. It became the house and the part of Islam. Okay? Any questions up to that? Any questions about Al-Andalus? There is so much to talk about, guys. There is so much to learn. Al-Andalus nowadays, mashallah, nowadays there is so much English literature. Okay, nobody can come and have the excuse and say, I can't find books on Al-Andalus. I don't know, where do I find something about Al-Andalus? You just type in Al-Andalus in the search machine and you will see what you can find, especially in English. Okay, inshallah. So Al-Andalus, many of us have heard of it, but many of us think they know, but we still don't even know what Al-Andalus actually really was about. Because Al-Andalus was not only the geographical part that we just discussed, Spain and Portugal, but it goes on into other countries. Okay? Now, that gives you a little bit a better idea of Spain, of the several battles, but we don't have time to go into that. But it gives you an idea, okay? Spain and Portugal. Do you see Portugal on your left side, basically, on the peninsula? You see Spain, the biggest country, and then Portugal. And above Spain, which country is that? Above Spain, in the north of Spain? France. Very good. Excellent. Up to there, the Muslims went. Okay? And slowly, this story of Al-Andalus it decreased. Okay? So it started in 711, as we said, Tariq bin Ziyad was there. And in 750 already, the Christians had conquered the northern part of Spain. So you see the green part of Spain in the north of the peninsula. The green one, which says 750, that became already Christian in the very first 40 years. And that's how the Christians came slowly down. You see the different colors? Slow. From green down to yellow and to red and lighter red and so on. So 750, 800, 1050, 1150. That's how slowly the Christians came down to the last city of Spain, which was still Muslim, Granada. Okay, and this is called the Reconquest, Reconquista. The Spaniards used to call this La Reconquista, the Reconquest, the conquering back. And this happened over 700 to 800 years. Look at that. How much patience did these people have? 700 to 800 years. Anybody has any idea how many generations this is? What is a generation? How many? 25. Right? As far as I remember, 25 years a generation. Times whatever, times 4 is 100, times 7. Imagine that 700 years, 800 years. And this, during that time period, we had scholars, Muslim scholars coming from that part of the world. Muslim scholars, Spanish, Portuguese, Muslims from that part of the world. So it was not something that came from outside then, Arabs and Berbers and Africans. It was something that became very European for 700 to 800 years. So from 711 to 1492, in this period of time, for 750 years, the Muslims ruled Al-Andalus. This again is another fountain in Italy this time. So the Muslims, as we said before, did not just go to Spain and Portugal. They also went to France. They also went to Italy. This is a fountain you can find in Italy that the Muslims have left behind. This is a church in Italy nowadays. That used to be a mosque. Okay? That happened a lot. When the Christians took over, the mosques were turned into churches. And many of the churches, when the Muslims came, they turned them into mosques. Okay? There was nothing wrong with that, as long as they took, of course, the statues and the churches, their crosses and all this stuff when they took them away. So that's a church nowadays.
Can I just quickly ask?
Yes, please.
Why did they call it reconquest? Like Christian reconquest when they weren't there in the first place? When the Christians weren't there in the first place?
The Christians were there. They were there. When the Muslims arrived, there were Christian elements there. They were there. But the Christians who were actually the inhabitants of Spain and Portugal at that time, the indigenous people, were suffering under the Germanic tribe that was ruling them. Okay? So it was Christians ruling other Christians, but the taxation system, for example, was extremely strong and extremely hard upon the Iberian people, the people who were living there before. And these people who were living there before were the first ones to accept Islam or to join Tariq bin Ziyad against the Germanic people. So it was occupied by other Christians, Germanic tribes. Okay? Right? So why they call it reconquest is still the right, it's a good question. Why is it reconquest after 700, 800 years? I mean, reconquest, honestly? What do you reconquer there? The idea of the Muslims from Africa coming over here and occupying our country has been there and had been given through to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation up to until nowadays. Even nowadays, the idea is there. It exists in one word, and language is very powerful, guys. Language is extremely powerful. We said before, look what they call these people in the north of Africa. They call them barbarians. This term exists nowadays. What do the Muslims, what do the Spanish people and the Portuguese, what do they call Muslims? What did they call them and still call them nowadays? What do they call them? Did they call them Muslims? No, they gave them another name. What was the name? Say that again, I didn't hear it. No, they didn't call them Berbers. The Moors. They called them Moors. Moros. You've heard of Moors, right? Moorish people. Moorish architecture. Moorish this, Moorish that. What does it mean? It has a very clear explanation, a clear definition. It comes from Greek and it means black, mavros. That means people who are black coming from Africa. That's what it means. That meant they basically established a narrative which still exists nowadays in the heads of the Europeans. Us Christian white Europeans against black African Muslims. Do you see the narrative that they established? Oh, now I can see you. You see? Do you see the narrative? The narrative is very simple. It's an ethnicized and nationalized narrative which we have been living ever since in Europe. Islam is not part of Europe. Islam came from Africa. And the people who brought Islam to Europe, to us, were African people, black people. So these were the Moors. Okay? But that's not true. Because for 700 to 800 years, there were many Spanish and Portuguese reverts. There were many French and Italian and Maltese and other people who accepted Islam. And not only did they accept Islam, but many of them were scholars later. And we know them until nowadays. Al-Qarnati, for example, Al-Qurtubi. We know many, many people from that time who have become scholars. In 700, 800 years, excuse me, can this still be a country as it was 700, 800 years before? Of course not. Right? So, the narrative, it was a very good question. I can't see you, brother, but it was a very, very good question indeed. Why Reconquista? Why Reconquest? What do you reconquer there? What do you reconquer? After 800 years, what do you reconquer? It's the same like nowadays. I mean, look, we have been living here now, third, fourth generation, or many already people, of Bangladeshi, Pakistani origin, whatever. Now, honestly, aren't you British? Of course, you are as British as any British who has a Polish background, or a Swedish background, or a German background. Right? The difference is your parents and grandparents came from somewhere else. But you're already third and fourth generation British. You are British. So, what about 800 years later? 800 years. You're still not British after 800 years? I mean, subhanallah. What do we have to do then? So, this palace that you see here, it exists in Venice. You can find this in Venice. Venice is a city in Italy, in the north of Italy. And it has Islamic architecture. Do you see that? Islamic architecture, the arches, the windows, very Islamic. But the Muslims never went to Venice. What happened? The Muslims never went to Venice. They never went to establish the Islamic architecture there. In Spain and in Portugal, we know, yes, of course, the Muslims were there. But how come there's Islamic architecture in Venice, in Italy? Who can tell me that?
Well, Muslims were the leaders of architecture at that time, so whoever they taught, they went to the Islamic countries to learn. When they came back, they copied and pasted.
Number one, what the brother said, absolutely right. We should not forget that during the time of Al-Andalus, from 711 to 1492, the leading civilization in Europe was without a doubt the Muslims. Without a doubt.
The golden civilization.
The golden civilization, the golden age, without a doubt the Muslims. So people copied them, and there were even British people, and we'll talk about this later inshallah, the English people who came over to Al-Andalus, they went to study in the universities in Al-Andalus, because there were no universities at the time here. As I said, Oxford and Cambridge was established in the 11th century. So there was no Oxford and Cambridge, there were no universities in Britain at that time. So there were British people, English people, German people, French people going over to Al-Andalus, learning Arabic in order to learn something, in order to be able to study. And the thing that they had to learn, don't think it was just a minor thing. We are talking about what I'm wearing here now, what most of you wear. Glasses were invented by the Muslims in Al-Andalus, for example. Opticians, the idea of optometry, the idea of physics, the idea of chemistry, that all came and was given through to Europe through the universities in Al-Andalus. We would not have had laptops and computers nowadays without the algorithm. Algorithm, as you hear, the name itself, the word itself, algorithm is obviously Arabic. Any word in the English language, any word in the European languages that we speak in Europe, starting with al, indicates that they are originally Arabic. Alcohol. Alcohol is, of course, Arabic. And the Muslims invented alcohol not to drink, but to use it for the wounds, to disinfect. So there's nothing wrong with having alcohol at home, guys, okay? But use it for the right purpose, okay? Now, but the next thing is, again, the same castle, the same palace, showing another angle. But what the brother said, so indeed, Islamic civilization that time was at its peak. And people would copy Islamic civilization. Next to this one, trade don't forget that people would do trade with the highest and mightiest civilization of the world, again, the Muslims. So the Venetians were known for being tradespeople and very advanced, but they would actually trade with the Muslims. They had to trade with the Muslims, right? So what they saw in the Muslim world, they just took it with them and they copied in the Christian world at the time, okay? Al-Andalus was just one part of the Muslims in the influence in Europe. There is another part that influenced Europe. This time, these people did not come from Africa, they came from Asia. Who is that? Thank you for the mistake. Turks. No. They were not Turks. Turks exist since 1923. But it's a very important point that I would have mentioned anyway. But we mention it now. So they were not Turks. They were Ottomans. There was a dynasty, and these people and everybody was living under the Ottoman rule was an Ottoman citizen. Had I been living under Ottoman rule, I would have been an Ottoman citizen. Okay, with a different background. There were Armenians, there were Greeks, there were Christians, there were Orthodox, there were Catholics, there were Protestants, there were Jews. They all were Ottoman citizens. That is an extremely important point here now. Because a Turk just exists as a Turk in a nation of Turkey since 1923. Before 1923, there was no Turkey. There were no Turks. Nobody ever called himself a Turk. Never. And definitely not the sultans. Yes?
How about the Seljuks that existed before Ottomans? They were Turks, right?
Okay. No, they were Turkic. There is a difference. Okay, Turkic people existed before Islam, long before Islam, and they even established countries in Europe. There is a country in Europe which is called Hungary. What do you think it's called, Hungary? Because they're hungry there? Okay, think of, okay, divide the term in two. Hungary. The Huns, not Han, the Huns. Attila the Hun in the 4th century. The Huns was a Germanic tribe. They came from Central Asia, from the same place where the Ottomans came. And they were also a Turkic, did I say Germanic? Sorry. A Turkic, I'm sorry, no. Rewind. The Huns were a Turkic tribe. They were Turkic people. Turkic, not Turkish. They were Turkic people, means they came from the same area which of the people nowadays in Turkey, Turks, came from originally. Okay? But they were Turkic. The same like Finnish people. Finnish people. Finnish people come from the same, they have the same roots as the Hungarian people. They actually split in Hungary, and a part of the people from Central Asia settled in what is nowadays Hungary and created the country of Hungary, and others went to Finland and created the country of Finland. Two languages, Finnish and Hungarian, have common roots, Central Asian. And they come closer to Turkish than to any other European language. So, Turkic people, not Turkish. The Seljuks were also Turkic people, but not Turkish people. Turkish people, Turkish as an ethnicity, as a nationality, exists just since 1923. Okay? And that's extremely important to know because people make policy with that. That is big times politics that we're talking about here now. The same like Berber Arabs, big times politics. Getting people to fight against each other, getting people to hate each other because of these petty reasons that we don't know. They don't know themselves even. They don't know themselves. Now, ethnically, we are all different, even in this very masjid, most probably. Even if you tell me now I'm Bangladeshi or I'm Pakistani, most probably your tribal background is different because Bangladesh did not exist before 1950s, 60s, right? Pakistan didn't exist before 1947. India didn't exist before that time. When we're talking about India, we're not talking about the India of today. Right? The India of today is an invention by the British. The Pakistan of today is an invention of the people modern times in the 20th century. There was no Pakistan before. There was no Bangladesh before. So, for the same reason, there were not Turks before. There were no Pakistanis before. There were no Bangladeshis before. Okay, these were all people coming from the area, okay, of Sindh, okay, Hindi, and if you want to call it, you can call it Indian area, Indian whatever. Like the language is called Hindi, Urdu, the same thing, just written differently. Okay, So now we have to look at that. That's very, very important. We have to understand. We have to see the difference. So the Ottoman people who came over, that was a dynasty. When they come to Europe, they came to the Balkan Peninsula, okay? And if you look at the map now that you have in front of you, this map shows a part of the Ottoman Empire. It's not the widest and the biggest part of the Ottoman Empire, but it shows you a very big and important part, especially for Europe. You know what it says? Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. These are all, this is called the Balkan Peninsula, okay? And this part of Europe used to be part of the Ottoman Empire for around 400, 500 years. Very long time again. And this is the part where the last war happened in Europe. What am I talking about? What war? World War II was the last one in Europe? MashaAllah, yahi. The last one in Europe was World War II?
No, in what sense? War in what sense?
War.
Bosnia, yeah, 19.
Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
That's it. That was the last war in Europe. And there was a war, in the sense of a war. So, in the sense of a war, 1992 to 1995, and I know, I'm very much aware of it, that at school we all know what happened 70 years ago, but we know nothing what happened 25 years ago in front of our doorsteps. We as Muslims should be aware that a massacre, a genocide, and a war in the name of the Serbian Christians, you know, the Chetniks as they call themselves, in their name, it happened against the Muslim people living in Yugoslavia at the time. Yugoslavia was a country which nowadays doesn't exist anymore and is made out of 7 countries nowadays. And in these 7 countries, we have 3 or 4 Muslim countries nowadays. Subhanallah. Bosnia, Kosovo, look at Albania, well, not part of Yugoslavia, but a separate country with more than 70% Muslims. Turkey, more than 90% Muslims. Subhanallah. Islam and the Muslim countries were in this continent, in Europe, for a long, long period of time. Long before immigrants came over here. These are not immigrants, these were European people. And now we know. But Yugoslavia before, it was an enclosed country where Muslims, Christians, Jews, whatever, they were all living together, but they were not allowed to practice their religion freely. And nowadays they come out with that. Okay, and many of them have lost their Islam. Many of them have lost Christianity. Many have lost Judaism. Because that was a country where they were not allowed to practice their Islam. Now, this gives you a little bit a better idea of what we're talking about in Europe now. This is the southeast of Europe. So the Balkan Peninsula, Serbia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey, Greece. Okay? And these different countries that you see there, these countries were once... not all of them, but okay, in the north of Greece, they were part of Yugoslavia. Okay, Albania was an independent country, but it was part of the communist world. Okay, and Bulgaria, Romania were also once communist countries. Okay, and this whole part is the Balkan Peninsula. The Ottomans even reached a country as Austria. Have you ever heard of Vienna? The capital of Austria? The gates of Vienna? You know this guy who went in New Zealand and killed more than 50 people in a mosque?
Yeah.
What do you know about him?
He quoted the last king who had the last war.
Okay, yes, but what about the gates of Vienna? That's right what you're saying. He had a rifle, an AK-47 I think it was. And on the rifle he had put 2 dates, 732 the one, 1453 the other. And he had written on it Gates of Vienna. You see why we're talking about history here now? All this is reference to history. If you don't know what this guy is talking about, he was, you know, he was listening to something. He was into history. He knew more history than you do here now. But he was just twisted. And he had a problem with what he knew. So what is 732, 1453, and the Gates of Vienna? Gates of Vienna, the Ottoman dynasty had reached up to Vienna. And the gates of Vienna, that means there's a blog nowadays online, you can find it, it's called the Gates of Vienna, which is an Islamophobic, racist blog against the invasion, as they call it, of the Muslims in Europe. And they seriously try to tell their people that the Muslims who are here in Europe are just here to invade our civilization, to rape our women, and to make our children Muslims. So for them, anybody like me sitting in front of you is actually I'm committing treason, a traitor. Because me as a European, I accepted Islam, and this is what for them is one of the worst things that can happen. At least in your case, they say, well, we can see it on you guys, where you come from. But if you have people like us, like Greeks, Italians, Germans, French, accepting Islam, what are we going to do with all these people? And at this moment, we're talking about millions of Europeans who have accepted Islam, alhamdulillah, especially since September 11. So for them, and for him, for this person who committed this atrocity, for them, for these kind of people with this mindset, that is something that they see in Islam and the Muslims in Europe, an invasion, an invading force. The other 2 days that he had there, the one was an indication for the opening of Constantinople, 1453, and the other one was 732. That was when Charles, one of the Frankish kings, 732, the Battle of Poitiers, Tours-en-Poitiers, when they actually said that they fought the Muslims back in France. So, up to there, the Ottomans. Any questions with regards to Al-Andalus and the Ottomans? Two roots, two different influences that we discussed. Islam from Africa and Islam from Asia, coming into Europe. And that is already a very big part of Europe that was influenced by the Muslims from Africa or from Asia. And we're talking about two different periods of times. The one is from 711 to 1492, and the other one is actually from the 1400s on up to 1923. 1923. That's when the Ottoman Caliphate fell. That's when the Ottomans turned a country or the empire into a country, and it became Turkey. And that's why 1923 is the Republic of Turkey, with the birth of the Turkish people and Turkish nation. Okay, in the modern sense, in the modern understanding of what it means, a nation. Because the Ottomans before were also a nation, but it was more the nation in our understanding, as a Muslim perspective, a nation. Ummah versus nation, right? Okay, any questions up to that? Anything you want to ask? Yes, bro.
Where did the Kurds come into this picture?
The Kurds are an Asian people, as the Ottomans were Asian people. And before, Jazakallah khair, before, don't forget, we're talking about an empire. The Ottoman Empire was an empire. And as long as an Islamic empire existed, it was a multicultural, multinational, multi-religious, multicolored empire. And that's where anybody fit in, and the Kurds as well, and the Greeks as well, and the Armenians as well, and the Jews as well, and so on. There was not an issue of where are you from, who are you. They were all called millets. In an Islamic system, a millet means anybody who goes back to their religious roots, okay? So in an Islamic country, in an Islamic empire, you have people just divided according to their religion, according to their background, according to their faith, to their belief. And they have people above them who follow the law of their faith. For example, the Jews have their chief rabbi, okay? The Catholics have the Pope, and so on and so on. So the Kurds were just one of the millions of thousands of nations living in the Ottoman Empire as well. That's it. That's all it is. Because we know the Kurds nowadays because of the issue nowadays, but for the same reason I can tell you what about the Albanians. The Albanians used to also live in the Ottoman Empire. There was never an Albania before 1912 until Albania existed. Before 1912, there was no country that was called Albania, never. No empire, no country, nothing. Albanian people are just ethnically different people to, let's say, the Gypsies, let's say the Greeks, let's say the Romanians, let's say the Bulgarians. Okay, that's it. And the whole Balkan Peninsula is full of different peoples with different languages, different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions. And they could just live harmoniously under the Ottoman rule because they were given rights, each and every one of them in their faith, according to their faith, based on their faith. Nowadays, we are living in a nation-state environment. Nowadays, we're living in Britain. Everybody living in Britain is a British citizen, but don't forget, Britain is 4 countries. What will be? Well, we don't know how long still, but there is There is Scotland, Northern Ireland, there is Wales, and there is England. 4 countries, right? And each and every country of this has its people. English, Welsh, Scottish, and Irish. And again, amongst these people, there are other people who are immigrants. Okay? And what identifies somebody being English or being Scottish is mainly the same language, the history, and where they come from originally. So this is a nation state nowadays. Okay? Now, this goes against Islam. This idea goes against Islam. The Islamic values saying we don't identify people according to their nationality or background. We identify people according to their faith. That's the most important thing in Islamic state, in Islamic country. Okay? And they have rights according to where they come, what their faith is, what their base is. So they go back to their rabbis or their pope or whoever else is their leader, their religious leader. Okay? So that makes a big difference. And we have to understand that before we come and judge, or we go and judge an empire such as the Ottoman Empire, or the Abbasids or the Umayyads, all these empires, the Seljuks, these are all Islamic empires. Before we judge them with the eyes of the 21st century, we have to understand their century first, and we have to understand the history first. Okay? Any more questions with regards to that? Yes, bro?
Just a quick question. So what you've been saying is that initially it was the Muslims in North Africa who initially went to Europe, and then the Muslims in Asia followed afterwards.
Long afterwards. I mean, yes. The Ottomans came in the 13th, 14th century actually to Europe. Okay? And they came from the other side. They came from the east. Okay? Whereas the North Africans came from Africa from the south. Okay? And influenced another area of Europe. Okay? If you look at Spain, Portugal, Italy, there's another area of Europe. Whereas the Ottomans influenced the whole Balkan Peninsula up to Austria. Okay? But which is more than half of Europe. Altogether is more than half of Europe. And the third route comes now. Eastern Europe, which has not been influenced too much, had not been influenced too much until the beginning of the 19th century, by none of them, neither the Ottomans nor the Moors coming from Africa. Another Muslim people came to Eastern Europe and to Northern Europe. Do you know who they are? The Tatars. The Tatar people came from what is nowadays Russia, Central Asia, okay? And they came over to Eastern Europe, Lithuania, Poland, Estonia, and Finland. Finland was influenced by Tatar people. They were just 1%. They are just 1% of the population, very tiny, small. But they were so important for the people at the time of that region, because that time the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a massive country, a massive empire. And they needed to have protection from the people surrounding them. And the best protectors were the strong Asian Tatars. They came, they had to flee Genghis Khan, Mongolians, the Mongols were chasing them out of Asia. So they came towards Europe, and Europe said, okay, come to us. We give you a special status, nobility status. Look at this, these were refugees. Think of nowadays what's happening around us, So these were refugee people. They came into Eastern Europe, and the Eastern European Christians gave them villages to live in, they gave them madrasas to build, they gave them mosques to build, they even gave them women to marry. That was absolutely uncommon of the Europe of that time to allow a Muslim from outside to marry a Christian woman. But they were allowed to marry Christian women in order to stay and to protect this empire against the rest. Look at that now. And the very same people nowadays, Eastern Europeans, the very same people nowadays do not want any Muslim to cross their border. It's the very same people. These Muslims did not only protect these countries, but they even helped to establish new countries, such as Poland. Poland did not exist as Poland before. It became an independent country after the Second World War. The Tatars, there was a special cavalry of the Tatars who were fighting with the Poles together to establish Poland. And you know what, I tell you one thing, the Polish people know that, are very much aware of that, and they do appreciate that, and they do love the Tatar people for that. But they do not love the Muslim people for that. Okay? So they take it as It's the Tatars who did it, ethnically, right? This nationalistically, basically, these people, they're our people, it's okay. The Tatar people are okay, they're right, they're okay. But not the Arabs who come now to us or whoever, okay? So, but the Tatars, they influence Eastern Europe heavily, even with, even with food. The national dish, for example, one of the national dishes in Finland and in Poland has that Tatar influence. And it's incredible if you look at Finnish cuisine. Finnish cuisine has a lot of Tatar influence. You wouldn't say with 1% of the population, but a lot, mashallah. And this is just, we're touching really, I mean, what I'm giving you here now is just a general idea, a very general idea. And maybe that's the time now to introduce whoever wants to, and sisters also as well. I left some of the books with my wife upstairs, with the sisters. The Islamic History of Europe. This is a textbook, and I call it an alternative textbook. How Islam has become part of Europe. Now, what we're just discussing, all this and more, you can find in this book. Okay? And this book can be used as a homeschool, as a source for homeschooling. It can be used actually next to the normal curriculum. And alhamdulillah, I'm proud to say that at this moment in Birmingham, there are 2 schools that have accepted to teach this as an extracurricular activity, and inshallah it will also join the history curriculum, inshallah, very soon. So there are 2 schools in Birmingham at this moment teaching this book, and I'm hoping that more will also come in London and other places. So whoever wants to purchase this book, normally online it costs £24, today it costs 20. Okay? So you would help me, my project, my work that I'm doing at this moment, very much with simply purchasing this book for yourself and for your children. So in this book also, yes please.
When we were talking about Europe,
Yeah.
and you said that Turks, or Turkic people, as ethnically called for them, they came in the 1300s.
Yeah.
Where are we drawing the lines for Europe? As in, there was no Europe at that time, right? And
Geographically it was a Europe, but nobody had the notion of Europe like nowadays. Like Europe, Europeans, no. But geographically Europe was there.
So where does the geography, does it start with Malzika or in Sultan
There is no clear definition even nowadays for Europe. Even nowadays there's no clear definition for Europe. You know, there is no clear definition at all because of the landmass going into Asia, going actually into Africa as well.
and Russia?
Yeah, Asia.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly. Russia, for example, is the best example. What is Russia now? Is it an Asian country or is it a European country? They say up to Moscow is geographically European. But from Moscow onwards, they say it's Asia. So St. Petersburg and Moscow are actually European countries. They say, geographically. Azerbaijan, what is Azerbaijan? It's in the Caucasus area. Actually, if Turkey is Europe, then Azerbaijan should also be Europe. Okay? Difficult. Yes or no? Definition-wise, many definitions exist.
And Russia claims otherwise as well. Russia thinks it's up to Ukraine that.
Listen, everybody plays around with whatever fits them, okay? It's like the Turks also like Istanbul, for example. You know, if you take now the only big city in Europe which is divided between Asia and Europe, okay, Istanbul, clearly. You have a certain part which is part of Europe, and you have a certain part which is part of Asia, of the same city. Now, the same country of Turkey is 5% of Turkey is Europe, 95% is Asia. But it counts as part of Europe. It counts as part of Europe. Turkey is part of Europe, no doubt. And it's good for us to recognize it as part of Europe because it is the biggest Muslim country in Europe. Okay? Yes, bro.
The European Union denies it.
Sorry?
Sorry, the European Union denies it. That's a different story. That's a political thing, not a geographical.
That is, exactly. The definitions, sorry, bro. But the definitions are different because of exactly that. Cultural definitions are different to political definitions. Social definitions are different to historical definitions, geographical definitions. So geographically, there is a clear line, and it goes into Russia, okay, and the Caucasus. So these are all part of Europe. Politically, absolutely not. It's whatever is Europe is decided by the European Union, okay? But the problem is that within the European Union, you have countries that are not part of the European Union, but are Europe. Albania.
Like Britain, after 31st of January.
Well, yeah, now. Yeah. Exactly. Switzerland. Let's go into, neutral territory. So, yes. Yes, bro.
Well, you mentioned about Tartars. Can you just reiterate their strengths? What made them so appealing to the Europeans?
Okay, there were people who actually lived on their horses, nomadic people. You can imagine, built like me, no? Mashallah. So, anyway, so strong, very fighting people. I mean, warriors. So when they, sorry?
They had a reputation.
They had a reputation, absolutely. First of all, they had a reputation. Second of all, you didn't need a reputation to just look at one of them. One of them was like 10 of the European soldiers. So that was one thing. Second of all, the reputation that followed them. So the one thing is, obviously, in themselves, there were already people who came over as warriors, and they could clearly fight. Second was the reputation. They fought the Mongols, okay? And they were chased away by the Mongols because the Mongols were bigger and the Mongol Empire was an empire. That's all. Not because they were weaker in strength. Not at all. Not at all. Okay? The Tatars had also the reputation of being actually, once they're loyal to you, they're loyal. That's it. And it shows until nowadays, if you look at Tatars, for example, in Poland or in Lithuania or in Russia, you saw that these people consider themselves as being part of Poland, being Polish. Okay? They fought for Poland. Okay? They didn't even fight for an independent country. There is no independent Tatarstan, by the way. Tatarstan is a province in Russia. That's it. Right? So many reasons why. And definitely the reasons, the most obvious ones, is we need friends for enemies, against our enemies. So there we are, And they needed women. And they needed to settle somewhere down. So they were given all that. They were even they were given a noble status. They were like blue blood, basically. Until recently in the parliament, they were allowed to be in parliament as representing themselves. So this is massive. Especially if you imagine now, we're talking about 16th, 17th century.
So if you go to Poland, can you go to a place where
Yes.
they existed?
There are villages still in Poland. In the southwest of Poland, you will find still villages where there are mosques still there. You do have to ask for the key. Even on Jummah, you will not find many Tatars praying. And that's another point that I wanted to go to quickly, actually. You bring me to exactly that point. Look what happened to the Tatars. The Tatars were allowed to stay in that country, in that region. They were allowed to have their madrasas, their schools, their children getting married. They were free with their deen, everything without a doubt. But what happened to them? They totally assimilated into this new type of society. They assimilated so much that nowadays you will not be able to tell who is who. You go to Poland, you're right, you can go to Poland and you can find these mosques, little mosques, Eastern European type of massages, but there is no Tatar around, no Imam around, there's nobody to open them. They have the key, the village main guy has the key, whatever, you can ask for the key, go in, they show you around, there are Tatar people earning a living next to this one, showing him, playing the guide, the tourist guide, showing you a little bit around the village, but that's about it.
They lost their religion.
And now comes the opposite of what happened to the Muslims in Spain and in Portugal and in Italy. What happened to these people there? They were forced out of their home countries. They were forced, they had to leave. Many of them were massacred. Many of them went to live in Muslim land if they could. Most of them were actually massacred. There was a clear genocide that happened, clearly. The difference is the ones were not assimilated, of course, because they were the majority. The others were a minority, and look at connection now to nowadays. We're not learning history because of some battles and some history, some facts, but we're learning history to understand what's happening around us. We're living in a country in the majority is non-Muslim. We are having our children here, we have our madrasas here, we have our freedom. Draw the comparison now to what I just said. Draw the comparison to what happened to the Muslims in Spain, and the comparison to what happened to the Muslims in Poland, Lithuania, Finland. They were free to do there as we are free to do here. With, of course, there's discrimination, there's Islamophobia, everything is there. However, the chance that we have here at this moment, tonight, being here, having a mosque, this is not something that's common. Don't think it's normal, by the way, to all of you and to the children. Do not think that the chance that we have in this country, as Muslims, to just having a mosque. In many countries, Muslims struggle to get a mosque, a place for prayer, worship. In Greece, they still didn't have a mosque until recently. So, the freedom that we have, we should learn from our history. What happens, many Muslims, and I do realize, I just came back from Germany, yesterday I came back from Germany. And in Germany, many Muslims, in many parts of Germany, struggle. The reason is simply, there is a lot of Islamophobia going on, and there is a lot of the Muslims, especially the women with hijab, they cannot go to work with a hijab, which for us here is absolutely common and normal. How many of our wives work here? How many of our women go with hijab to school? You cannot go with hijab to school there. So don't take this for granted. But what happens? Muslims down there in Germany, I must say, when I'm there, I feel more welcome there than I feel here. Here, you know, you feel that we have it too good. It's fine. It's all right, isn't it? It's okay. We have our mosque, we have our madrasas, our children can go. It's fine. Our girls can wear hijabs, our women can wear hijabs. It's okay. We're kind of complacent with it. We're fine with that. But in a place where you have to fight for your rights, you feel that Muslims are more aware of their Islam. They are much more aware of their Islam down there than they're here. I came to live in this country 20 years ago. I chose to come to this country 20 years ago for my family, for myself, because of that freedom. But I'm very much aware and conscious of that freedom. Are you aware and conscious of that freedom in this country? I doubt it sometimes. I doubt it. I have conversations up and down the country with Muslims, having grown up, having their children and everything, and they do not understand and do not appreciate the freedom and the chances that are given to us Muslims in this country. Do not forget, at this moment, we're talking about 200,000 British Muslims as well. A very big amount, mashallah. They influence Islam as well here. And I find it extremely important. Okay, extremely important. We need to know that. So we need to learn this from our history. History is really not just there to learn some dates. And as you have heard, you have barely heard any dates. I haven't mentioned anything. I mentioned 7/11, I mentioned Tariq bin Ziyad, but it's not about certain people, certain dates, certain incidents. It's about the development. It's about seeing history as part of what has happened to us here, what is happening to us here now. Yugoslavia. If we don't learn from what happened to Yugoslavia, and I'm very sure, I'm looking into the crowd and I'm looking at the children, and I'm very sure that they don't even know what I'm talking about when I mention Yugoslavia, right? Yugoslavia. Most of you probably don't even know where this country was, that it even existed 25 years ago. But if I tell you the Holocaust, what is that? Children, what's the Holocaust? What happened? Okay, and what happened in Yugoslavia? Sorry? I can't hear him again loud.
No, he's saying they're also put in concentration camps.
Who was put in concentration camps?
The people in there.
In Yugoslavia.
Who? Who specifically? Jewish people?
The Muslims.
Muslim people, right? Muslim people. When did this happen? How long ago? It happened in the 1990s. And when did the Holocaust happen? In the 1930s, 1940s. Look what we're talking about. Do you understand what I made my point, right?
Yeah.
Okay? That does not mean that one is more important than the other. That's very important. Both important incidents happened in the 20th century in the civilized continent of Europe, by the way. Two of the only world wars in the world happened in the 20th century, just now. We were all alive. In the 20th century. It happened in the 20th century. The two most important, biggest wars in the world happened in the 20th century, where most people in the world got killed in a certain period of time. In the 20th century, it also happened that we had massacres and genocide against Muslims. Not long time ago, just in the 1990s, just now in Yugoslavia. And we should never forget this. And if we have forgotten it, then please find out what happened. Find out what happened. That's our right. Okay?
It's still happening in China now.
That's a very big other topic, yes.
Yeah, and in India now. Over the past 2 weeks.
India, we can go into Asia, we can go to Africa, we can go to many places where things are happening, have been happening. But I'm talking to you about what happened just in front of our doorstep, just here, not far away from here. It's not far. Yugoslavia. It's Europe. And I'm talking about the most civilized continent in the world as they want us to make believe. Okay? Which I doubt as a European, as a double European, I doubt it. I doubt if this was the most important or most civilized continent in the world. I doubt it. Because if I look at European history, I see a lot of bloodshed. There's so much blood that I cannot even look through anymore. And for example, always the issue of anti-Semitism that comes up every time. And last time it was an issue again just now where the elections. Where the elections were, there was the topic of anti-Semitism was mentioned for a certain party. Anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism? Can we Muslims seriously, if we go back to history, can we Muslims really go back and say, indeed, we as Muslims are anti-Semitic? Because that's what we are called nowadays. Can we seriously in history go back and show proof for Muslims, for Islamic countries, for Muslims in general in our history of having been anti-Semitic? Not one incident. Not one anti-Semitic incident from the moment of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the state forming of Medina, from Mecca, Medina onwards to the Umayyads, to the Abbasids, the Seljuks, the Ottomans. I cannot find one incident which was a clear anti-Semitic incident, as I can mention to you many of them in Europe. The term anti-Semitism became a part of Europe, of the Muslim world, since 1947, actually, since the establishment of the State of Israel. So it's a political term. It's a political problem. Okay? It's a political problem. It is not a religious, and it's definitely not a cultural problem. Definitely not. Okay? Look at this drawing. It's a drawing. Where do you think this is? It's a market where? Masjid in the background, right? Where do you think this is? Give you a hint, it's in Europe, but where? Any idea? Spain? Maybe, Spain, maybe. Al-Andalus, right? Maybe Al-Andalus, yeah. Can this be? If you look at the minaret, is the minaret a typical minaret? It's actually a very typical minaret for certain people in Europe. Istanbul, yes. So it's a very Ottoman minaret, right? Okay, it's not Istanbul, but it could have been.
Is that a mountain behind it?
Okay. That is in the 19th century. Athens, the center of Athens, the capital of Greece. Ottoman part of the world. That time Athens was part of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine that. And there are Muslims and non-Muslims living with each other, next to each other. You will see a typical bazaar-like atmosphere. Okay? And Greece is not a Muslim country. Okay? The majority of the Greeks were actually never Muslims. But the influence of Islam on Greece, and I give you the example of Greece simply because that's the easiest one to show, to find it. You can find it online easily. You see, the influence is extremely big. The way they were eating, until nowadays, Greek people, for example, although they're not Muslims, they have a lot of Islamic elements. Even in the language when they speak, they have Islamic elements. Spanish people even have, until nowadays, a very big influence of the Arab Muslim legacy. Example in their language. Have you ever heard anybody who knows Spanish? You know Spanish? Okay. Now, what do if a Spanish person speaks to another Spanish person and says, tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow? What do they say? Nos vemos mañana. Nos vemos mañana. Ojalá. Ojalá. Ojalá is inshallah. Exactly. Ojalá is a very typical Spanish term. As in Portuguese say oxalá. Oxalá in Portuguese, ojalá in Spanish. So Allah is there. What does the torero, you know the torero, the bullfighter, what does the bullfighter say when the bull comes towards him? What does he say? Ole. What is ole? Allah. Allah. Ole is nothing else but Allah. It's a dua. The Christians used to hear these people, these Muslims, like on the street saying, Ya Allah, whatever. They were making dua. So it became part of the language. Ole. Ole comes from Allah. Subhanallah. Right. And so many things. Have you ever heard of the island of Malta?
Yeah.
What do they speak there? They have 2 official languages. Any idea? What are the 2 languages in Malta?
Beautiful country, bro.
Yes. What do they speak? One is English, unofficial language, but their main language is Maltese. Have you ever heard what Maltese is? Maltese is, and I can tell you that most of us will understand Maltese on the spot now. I can count in Maltese from 1 to 10. Listen. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. I can say in Maltese, I love you. إني بحبك. I can say in Maltese, this is an island. هذا جزيرة. This is not Arabic, but it's Maltese. Up to 70% of the language of the Maltese is an Arabic idiom, an Arabic language. So people from Morocco, from Algeria, from Tunisia who speak their dialect, their Arabic dialect, who used to go to Malta, and many of them still live in Malta, they just don't have to learn English or another language. They can just communicate with their language, with their Arabic dialect, not the Fusha, not the classical Arabic, but with their dialect, they can just communicate with the people in Malta. So the Maltese language is the only European language which is actually an Arabic language. Of course, other languages have taken Arabic terms over, sure, like Spanish, Portuguese, Greek, Italian, but the language itself that the people speak, the Maltese language, is actually Arabic, 70%. Okay? And there's so much more, but I would like to stop here now. Can we put the other one on? Stop here now, and I would like to show you for the end, towards the end, if there are no more questions. We still have
35 minutes.
Excellent, half an hour. To basically discuss the issue of the UK, Britain. I mean, when I was sitting in Britain, you say, you hear something from Al-Andalus, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, fine, fantastic. But how did Britain get influenced by Islam? And what is the important point of...
Okay.
What is the important point, the history of Islam actually in Europe, in Britain, sorry. Now, what do you think? How did Britain become, or how did Islam enter the UK, Britain? How? Any idea? Islam and the Muslims in the UK. Now you must have at least one idea, because obviously most of you are sitting here now. They've come from somewhere.
Trade.
Trade, so when? How?
Around the Ottoman times.
Ottoman times, so 1500, 1600, right? Okay, so a brother is saying 1400, 1500, 1600, the Ottomans, there's a connection maybe there with trade. You agree? Yes, bro?
Seek asylum.
Seeking asylum, okay, when was that? More or less century?
1900s.
Maybe, the 1900s, right? That's what you're saying? Quite late, right? After the Ottomans, okay? Have you ever heard of... First of all, look at the map of the Muslims in Britain. Look at where Muslims live mainly in Britain. And you will see it's mostly the cities. London, of course, more than 1 million people, Muslims live in London, we know that. Now, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, in Edinburgh, in Scotland, you will find, of course, people. So mainly in the bigger cities. But have you ever heard of King Offa? King Offa, who's that? Who was that? Who was King Offa? King Offa of Mercia. Unfortunately, the ladies, we cannot hear them, but I'm sure that they can. Yes? He wasn't. Yes, Masha. What's your name? Sorry, what's your name? Uzair, can you come to me after that, please? When you're done, when we're done here, yeah? Come to me, okay? Is your dad here? Uzair, okay. Can you come to me after that, inshallah, okay? Uzair, very good. He was an Anglo-Saxon king, right? And do you know when he ruled? Which century? In the 8th century. 8th century. 757 to 796. Now this very man had gold coins minted for himself. And I don't know how well you can see it on the slide, but on the one side of the gold coin it says Offa Rex. That is the Latin term of King Offa. So Offa Rex, King Offa, and the Latin term, the Latin language was used that time in Christian Europe as a general language. And on the other side it says La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. English coins were minted in this very place in the 8th century with La ilaha illallah. And you can see these coins in the British Museum here in London. Take your parents, take your children by the hand and go to the British Museum and discover Islam in Britain. Subhanallah. There's much more to see, but at least that. At least that. It doesn't cost you a penny, it's for free still. We don't know what Boris is going to do, but it's still for free. So, take your children, take them to the British Museum in London. Go and see gold coins minted in the British Isles under an Anglo-Saxon king in the 8th century with La ilaha illallah. Islam has nothing to do with this part of the world. It came in the 1960s with the guest workers, right? Nonsense. Next to this one. Have you ever heard of the belly cotton cross? Again, in the British Museum of London, you ask them with information, but downstairs there's a desk. And you ask them, where can I find King Offa's gold coins? They tell you where. They ask them also, where is the belly cotton cross? And the belly cotton cross is a tiny cross that was discovered in Ballycotton, which is a place in Ireland. And in the Ballycotton cross, there's nothing strange about the cross in a Christian country. But what is strange is that in this cross it says Bismillah. In this cross it says Bismillah. Same time period. Allahu Akbar. What is happening? Nobody can explain this. I have really gone through I've tried to find out what is happening. At this moment, nobody can really give you explanation. The only explanation they give you is a typical explanation. Yeah, that time, Al-Andalus was the peak of its civilization. Everybody would copy Al-Andalus, so the gold coins were just simply a copy of Al-Andalus. That's all true. That's all fine. But why La ilaha illallah? Why the cross then? The belly cotton cross with Bismillah in there. In Arabic, it says Bismillah. Why not in English? Write it with Latin letters. Why Bismillah at all? So, you see, so we need still, subhanallah, because I'm pretty much the only one going through this type of history. There is not a lot of help, and I'm the only one struggling to find out things here and there. And this is my full-time job, so unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't pay off, right? But I'm not doing it for the love of money, alhamdulillah. I'm doing it for the love of itself. Because let me tell you quickly one thing. How I became Muslim. All these great stories that you hear from a people, how they became Muslim. They heard the adhan, they read the Quran, they heard the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, mashallah. All this is wonderful and great. This all came later. I became Muslim pragmatically because I was told at Greek school that these Ottoman Turks, as you called them before, right? As we all learned it, they came to Greece and they raped our women, they killed our children, and they made them all Muslim. And then I found out, I was like, what's that? What are this guy saying? Can this be? And I found out that it was a lie. So I thought, if this was a lie, then maybe it's about Islam that what they're telling us is also a lie. And I discovered, indeed, alhamdulillah, I grew up in Germany, so I had the chance of knowing Greek and German. I went into German sources. I learned English later. I learned French later. So all these different sources and the different elements that exist in different languages, they showed me the opposite. That is not true. And what I'm telling you today, and the result of this book is 28 years of intense research and looking into something like that. And actually allowing me to look into Islam. After 3 years, I accepted Islam, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So, and then the Quran came, and then everything else came. The pragmatism came. It came simply, I realized that no, these people lie to us. There are lies out there. You go to school, they lie to you at school. That does not mean that you should not now suddenly, get out of school and, quit school and tell your father, please, I don't want to do science anymore, mathematics, and learn English and everything. I'm not saying that. But certain things you are lied to about certain things. Okay? And you have to use your own mind and your own brain. Use it. You have it. Allah gave it to you. Use it. Okay? And that's what I did. After my studies, during my studies, I found out so many things about Spain, about Portugal. I did Spanish language and Spanish language and literature. And in language and literature, they barely tell you something about the Muslims there. 800 years of Muslim influence in Spain, and they barely tell you anything about it. I had to figure it out myself. So please use it. You have the brain, so please use it. Okay? So look at that. Britain and Islam in Britain. Furthermore, the first coffee houses that were established in the 16th and 17th century in Britain on the high street. British coffee houses. You know that the church at that time had a problem with coffee houses, and not only in Britain, but in general. They were saying, for example, let me just find the right quote. The church was saying, for example, they did not like people going and drinking coffee, which came from the Muslim world, which the Ottomans brought to Europe and from there to Britain. They were saying, the Mahometan berry, they called the coffee Mahometan berry, is a first step to conversion to Islam. Yes, we're laughing. Imagine that. Imagine how our people were thinking that time. Okay? So don't drink coffee because you might end up being Muslim. Right? So, and that was absolutely normal. You had the high streets full of coffee houses at that time. And if you go to certain countries such as Austria, in Austria, the first thing they tell you in a tour guide, if you read a travel guide, you go to Vienna, the first thing they tell you to do is go and explore the Viennese coffee houses. And how did they get there? Of course, because of the Ottomans, Vienna, right? And so on and so on. There's so much more, but a quick one again. How long do we have? Okay. Now, look at that. Have you ever heard of a certain man, Sheikh Din Muhammad? Sheikh Din Muhammad lived in the 19th century. He came to England and set up an Indian bath and shampooing establishment in Brighton. Brighton, a beautiful place you have to go and see, definitely. He was so successful that he was appointed the shampooing surgeon to His Majesty George IV. So the King, George IV, would send people who had problems, lice issues, or using simply shampoo. Imagine that, guys. This man, Indian Muslim, came over with shampoo and soap to this country, which was, by the way, at that time the British Empire. And under their rule, India was under their rule. So this Indian Muslim came over with soap and shampoo and showed the king how to wash his hair. And together with him, he showed also others how to wash their hands, which still is a problem nowadays, by the way. I've experienced myself. It seems to be an issue for European people to wash their hands after they've been to the toilet. You have to explain it to them. So, whereas during that time of the Muslims in Al-Andalus, for example, that was an absolute normality. The Crusaders who went down to the Holy Land came back with one thing: they would wash. And the clergy, the Christian church, found it weird. You wash too often. Are you Muslim or what? Imagine washing your hands was a problem that time in Europe. So, the title of this man was shampooing surgeon to His Majesty George IV. And with him was a hammam, a bathhouse established in Brighton, in Britain. You cannot find the bathhouse anymore in Brighton, but in Brighton you can find something else. If you ever go to Brighton, and you should definitely go and visit this beautiful city, you will find a pavilion. Have you ever seen a pavilion which has this Taj Mahal type of architecture? In Brighton, you can go and find it. And the king established it that time, and he allowed the World War I and World War II Muslim prisoners of war or fighters for the king that time, allowed them to get better there, okay? To live there, basically, to become better. Now, look at this one here. Have you ever heard of a Lascar? Lascar, 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 C-A-R, a Lascar. These were people, Muslims mainly, living and working on the British ships for the British Empire, coming from Yemen, from Somalia, from North Africa. And they had established already in the 19th century, there were already mosques in Sheffield, in Liverpool, in London, in port cities. So Islam did not come with your parents and grandparents here in the 1960s. It came long, long, long before. The picture next to the Lascars on the boats, you will see Queen, which queen is that? Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria in the 19th century. And the man who's standing there with her is Munshi Abdul Karim. Have you seen this beautiful movie? You should watch it. You know, as it came slowly out, it also disappeared slowly. It's too good. Honestly, I mean it. It came out suddenly, I discovered it, and I've never seen it again. It's like you have to really look through Netflix and try to find it. Like, what the hell is this thing? You know, it's like it hasn't made an impact at all on the society. Of course, if it makes an impact on the society, then subhanallah, it's a beautiful movie. I'm not saying that everything is right that it says in the movie, but the movie describes indeed how Queen Victoria at that time was influenced by a Muslim man, how the Victorian society was influenced by a Muslim man, and not only Munshi Abdul Karim, but during the time of Queen Victoria, there was another man who influenced Islam in Europe, in Britain. Who's that? A very British Englishman, a very English Muslim. In the 19th century, Victorian Britain, the first Englishman who officially accepted Islam, established in his mansion, in his own place, a mosque. The first ever mosque in the UK was established in his mansion, not walking. Walking came later. The first man, the first person to establish Islam and an Islamic prayer place and a place of worship in the UK and Britain was Abdullah Quilliam William. He was an Englishman. He was not somebody from Pakistan or from India. It was Abdullah Quilliam William. Okay? And you can still go and see the mansion nowadays. It has been, mashallah, downstairs. The brothers are really busy with that. Mashallah, they have established, renovated the prayer place. It looks beautiful. Take your children and go to Liverpool. It's a day out. Why not? Take them one night, stay one night in a hotel over there, whatever you're going to do. It's beautiful. It's amazing to go and see. This is history in life. You go and see history. You see how Islam was established in this country, mashallah. It's beautiful to see. Beautiful. Absolutely amazing. Okay? So Abdullah Quilliam William, look at that. This is the Masjid of Woking. I think most of us know that, right? Not far from outside of London, right? Woking, that was the first place of worship with an Islamic architecture type of thing, right? And that was supported, money that came to build this came from the princes of Bhopal. It was not money spent by the British government at that time. The money that came to build this thing was actually, and that's why it has this Indian type of architecture, right? And style. Because of the princess of Bhopal. She financed it. Again a woman. Sorry. Again a woman. Subhanallah. But women are suppressed in Islam. The first university in the world was established by a Muslim woman. The first British university, British mosque, you know, as a place of worship was established by a Muslim woman. But women are suppressed, right? Alhamdulillah. So, we're coming to a point here. Again, it is difficult for me. I can go on the whole night. Okay? But it is such a beautiful topic to talk about. And to see that actually Islam is not something that came from outside. Don't forget one thing. Whenever they come and say, Jesus is, or Christianity is European, then I ask them, I never knew that Jesus came from Sweden. You know, Isa alayhi salam, of course, came from the same Middle East that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi salam came, that Abraham alayhi salam came, that all our prophets before came. All our prophets came from the Middle East and from the areas that we know nowadays, okay, where the prophets came. And the last one also came from there. And the one before the last one came from there. And they claim him for themselves. No, Christianity, if you want to take it that way, is not a European religion either. So, Islam, hopefully, we have all understood that Islam is as British, as European, as Christianity and Judaism is. So if there is a Judeo-Christian Europe and there's a Judeo-Christian civilization in this part of the world, then Islam plays definitely a part of it. And inshallah, again, whoever has still the chance to go and take a look at the books in the back there on the table. So please, you can help me with supporting my project and myself. Jazakumullahu khair. And we still have some chance to talk about everything if you want to now. Some questions can be answered now quickly. And we were actually, I think we had agreed that after Salat al-Isha, correct? That whoever wants to stay behind after Salat al-Isha, is this correct? So we can have a discussion after Salat al-Isha as well. Whoever wants to. The sisters, if they want to give through some strips, give through what their questions or comments or remarks. Who gets it? Who gets them? Okay. Right? Okay, so yeah, if you can give through the questions or comments that you have, we still have until hopefully 7 o'clock, right? Inshallah, 7 p.m. now, 15 minutes, yes. Yeah.
Wait, what's the name of that Akon movie?
Of what?
The name of the movie where she is. Forgot.
Victoria and Abdul, that's it. Victoria and Abdul is called, thank you. Yeah, Victoria and Abdul, yeah. Beautiful, nice movie, mashallah, very nice movie. It's worth it, really.
I want to ask, why is there, like, what do you call it, the view of, like, mainly from, as in Britain, we view, the south of Europe differently in terms of, like, the Muslims, how they came about, to the Eastern Europe, like the perspective of, us, when we look at Eastern Europe, we're different from British. Why is that the case, and why is there, like...
Well, Eastern Europe wasn't until recently. There was the Iron Curtains, they called it, right? That was part of the communist East. So it was closed for everyone, for us too. It was Western Europeans, in Germany, in Italy, or whatever. We had nothing to do with Eastern Europeans. We didn't know. Eastern Europe was just a place or places on the map. So Poland, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, these were all places on the map. We never had the chance to go to these places that time. You were not allowed to go in, you were not allowed to go out. It was communist, so it was something absolutely hidden and had a different development to the rest of Europe. So obviously for that reason, Eastern Europeans are very different to Western Europeans or to the rest of Europe. So that's why maybe the idea that there is nowadays here, and many of Eastern Europeans who came nowadays, many of the Eastern Europeans who came nowadays, they came from places such as Bulgaria and Romania and are originally ethnically gypsies. So they give a different image of Bulgaria and Romania. Okay? And Polish people who are now here, around 1 million of them, where people go crazy, like we have so many Polish people. Half of Germany is Polish, by the way. So I don't know what goes crazy, what there is to go crazy about. But anyway, these people now coming from Poland, nowadays are very different in development and as people as, for example, German, French, Italian people. That's it. That's probably the reason why. Okay? Yeah, we have a break at 6:50, which means we have a break for Adhan as well. Are there any questions now? We still have 5 minutes for up to... After Isha. Excellent. Great. Okay, so we're going to be here after Isha, inshallah. Great. Okay. Any more questions? Yes, bro?
It's slightly off topic. What's the seal in your ring?
This one is the Tughra of the Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire had a Tughra. Every sultan had an own Tughra, which indicates his name.
Yeah.
Okay? And they all had a certain structure that they built their name in. Beautiful. And somebody who has a Tughra nowadays, by the way, not a Muslim, is Putin.
Seriously?
Putin has his own Tughra.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yes. Okay, don't forget that's another topic on it, the Islamic influence. Moscow has more than 2.5 to 3 million Muslims. Moscow in itself is actually the biggest, is the largest urban center in Europe outside of the Muslim world, with a massive Muslim minority. Okay, we should not underestimate the influence of the Muslims in Europe, in Russia. And the Russians, if you look at certain videos, watch some YouTube videos, you see that every day Russian women convert to Islam on a daily basis. Now I see you guys going, yeah. Every day Russian women convert, okay? So there's enough Russian women in Russia nowadays who are looking for a man. Yes, that's really true. It's a problem over there. It has become a problem. Honestly, it's become a problem. So that is an issue that we come across if we find out. We have to find out these things. People are not aware of that. Yeah.
Do we know the reason behind it?
The reason.
In Russia.
It's the same reason why South American women, Latino women become Muslim on a daily basis. The same reason, because their men are useless. I'm sorry, but I have to say it that way. I've lived in South America, in certain parts of South America, where you have at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning already people sitting at the bars and getting drunk. Men sitting at the bar. And you see their women going with babies and everything, back and forth, going to work or going to survive. It is just simply the way that South America has to do, of course, the whole background history, slavery and so on, Family structure couldn't develop in that part of the world. So women are suffering. And it's women who accept Islam on a daily basis. In South America as well as in Russia. The same reason. Yeah.
So who's Tughra?
Sorry?
Who's Tughra?
This is just a general Tughra. A general way you use it to put in there basically the name. Okay? That's a Tughra. You can get it in Istanbul. You can get it in Turkey. Or you can get it in Germany, the Turkish shop. Okay? So yes, if there are no more questions, we're going to... Yes, bro.
Quick question. Do you think there will come a time where, like, for example, in the curriculum, in the school's curriculum,
Yeah.
for history maybe, they will implement some aspects of what you've spoken about today?
We should try to. That's what I'm trying. I've been trying for the last 3 years to do that. Okay, for the last 3 years. As I said, alhamdulillah, I've come to the point, 2 schools have accepted this in Birmingham. I'm hoping that whoever has any contacts, feel free to come and contact me. And I am looking into some more cooperation, definitely. And not only in London, but anywhere. So, yeah.
Is that Muslim schools?
Sorry?
The 2 schools that you're talking about?
Yeah, the Islamic schools, yes. For the moment, yes. Yes. If we get all Muslim schools on board, then the others will follow, inshallah. Look how many there are. So, yes.
So, since we have that much amount of rich history, would you say that we are not, as in we as Muslims, not necessarily forget our ethnicity, that's the main thing here, right? As Muslim Islam, which is what's in our heart.
Right.
We are here to stay, and we need to feel belonged here, and we need to participate in the society, as did the previous Muslims, our ancestors, as opposed to being secluding themselves to only Muslims, which is why they had a bigger impact.
Massive topic to discuss. I mean, brother, sorry, your name? Hanif discuss, this opens the topic for discussion for actually, inshallah, after that. But indeed, one extremely important point. Let's learn from the from the past the issue of assimilation, and not assimilate. But let's finally integrate. Integration and assimilation, these are 2 different things. And what is wished by Allah is integration. Now let us integrate. But the point is, what does it mean? Now we have to now sit as an ummah, as a Muslim British ummah, a people, I'm saying clearly singular, a people, we have to now come together as Muslim people for the sake of our children, ourselves. Come together and define finally what integration means. Does it mean that if I speak English at home, or if the children speak better English than Urdu or Punjabi or Bengali, does this necessarily mean that we are off integration and we're going into assimilation? Does this mean that? Okay? Does it mean that if my children have also non-Muslim friends, is this a problem necessarily? That's something we need to discuss. For some people it might be, for some it might not. But we have to discuss it based on scholarship and on our history. Because our ancestors knew Islam, maybe not on the point of scholarship, many of them were not maybe scholars, but they practiced Islam as Islam was. Don't forget, when our Muslim ancestors came to Europe, the Ottomans came to Constantinople, and they opened Constantinople. What did they do? They destroyed all Greek Orthodox churches being there? No. Did they kill all women there? No. What did they do? They allowed them to practice their religion, and they copied the architecture that was there and made it their architecture. The architecture we call nowadays Turkish. It's actually Byzantine, Greek Orthodox Byzantine architecture. There is nothing wrong. Why did they do that? Because they left the part of Islam being integrated in its surrounding and a place where it was. But the mistake that I make here, and I keep criticizing that, I keep criticizing that. We make a mistake in this country specifically, not only. We have Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Indians coming over here and building a Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian looking mosque. Beautiful. Of course, much more beautiful than these ugly buildings around us. But they have to be part of the surrounding. The people who conquered Constantinople did not do that. So who are we to do that? You understand what I'm saying? And it makes the impression, gives the impression, that's the Bengalis, that's the Pakistanis, that's the Indians, and that's the mainstream society. No. Like this, we're not integrating ourselves. You understand? But this is really, that gives a lot of food for discussion, actually, inshallah. We're going to stop here now, inshallah, because we need wudu and everything, and inshallah, hopefully whoever stays still here, inshallah, see you later, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Rasulullah amma ba'd. Now, let's...
Just a little bit closer.
Yeah. Now, for the ones who have remained, inshallah, just for half an hour, 40 minutes, let's just go into some issues. One that was mentioned already was the issue of... Brother was telling me from the student Islamic societies, for example, we experience, I mean, that in itself already is an Islamic society. Again, most of you might think that it's a normal thing, right, to have an Islamic society. In France, there is nothing like that, right? In Germany, they tried it for a while, they closed them all down, they closed down these prayer places. So again, you see, these things, you know, we need to be aware of the fact that these things just simply are not normal in other countries in Europe. And I was just now told that, for example, they experienced something like a case of a brother just accepting an invitation to a pub, for example. Okay? Just accepting an invitation to a pub and it's telling you things like, you know, listen, don't worry, I'm not going to drink. I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm just going to be sitting with them to join them in the pub. Question is, of course, what do you do in the pub? Not only is the consumption of alcohol haram, but everything that leads to the consumption of alcohol is also haram. So what are you doing in an environment like this? This type of integration, if they want to call it integration, that goes too far. That goes into assimilation already. It is difficult to find the exact position that we discussed before. For example, what is assimilation? What is integration? How far can I go? For many of us, it has to be an individual thing. It has to be individually. Everything that leads to haram is haram in itself. That is a concept in Islam. So, if I'm in an environment where they drink alcohol, that automatically will lead to that, it is haram to be there. So there is no matter of integration and trying to be one and trying to it's just simply not right. Why don't you just simply go to a restaurant with these people? Why don't you just put yourself in there and just say, you know what, why don't we just meet somewhere else? Why do we have to meet? Oops, wow. Okay, so it is, okay. So why don't we just simply meet somewhere in a restaurant, right? Now, again, the problem there becomes, of course, some will say they might order beer and everything. What can you do there? I mean, if you're in a restaurant in an environment where alcohol is there, you don't order alcohol, you ask them, you tell them simply, look, I would like to, can we just simply leave the alcohol part today? Talk to them. Most of them are actually quite, you would be surprised how open-minded they are. And I'm not talking about British people only, I'm talking in general. European people might be very open-minded. As we know, we've experienced it. And in my life when I was a student, for example, I remember, I will never forget this issue, and I keep telling this story very often. I used to work in a computer shop, okay, a big computer startup it was. And we were several Muslims. And the boss was a non-Muslim. And when I started, and it was time for Dhuhr, lunchtime, and I said, guys, where do you pray? They looked at each other and none of them actually gave me an answer. I realized they don't pray. I said, bro, I mean, come on. I'm a Muslim, I would like to make my salah. Yeah, you can pray later when you go home, you can pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib together. I said, no, bro, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I would like to go somewhere in a corner. Why not? I'm not asking for a prayer place. I'm asking for a corner somewhere. Where do you go? Say, yeah, leave it for later. I said, listen, I'm not going to discuss fiqh issues with you. but have you ever spoken to your boss? Said, no. Why not? Why have you never mentioned it to your boss? Thank you. Why have you never mentioned this issue to your boss? Because they're scared. All of them immigrant Muslims, right? All of them immigrant Muslims. So what happened? I decided to go to my boss and ask him and tell him, listen, I need somewhere a place. I'm not asking for a room. I'm just somewhere a place in the corner where I can go and make my salah. It's like, no problem. But can I ask you one thing? He said, please. Aren't you, all of you down there, are you all Muslims? He said, yes, we happen to be all Muslims. He said, how come that none of the others have ever come back to me to ask me that? I said, don't ask me that. That is not my task. My task is to do what I did for myself. You know? So look at that. The man said, no problem. Of course, the man could have said, what are you coming to ask me here? You're not here to pray. Yes, he could have done it, but he didn't. And many of our people think already that this is the answer. This is going to be the answer. Oh, he's going to be upset. So what if he's going to be upset? What's the problem? Anyway. Question from the sisters. Was king offered during the period of Abbasid Khilafah? During that period, 757 to 7, indeed, it was the Abbasid Khilafah, yes. King Offa was ruling during the period of the time of the Abbasids. We had in Islam, after the Khilafah Rashidin, the righteous caliphs, we had the Umayyad period, the Umayyad Caliphate, and until 750. And after 750, we had the Abbasids, who took over power from the Umayyads, and it was during the time of the Abbasids. You're absolutely right, sister. Yeah, right, Abbasids. The Abbasids were the ones, with Harun al-Rashid. He was the one who was ruling during the time of the Abbasid period, one of them. And that was a very flourishing time for the Muslims, as well as the Umayyad time was, of course, it had its own flourishing, its own period of importance, of course. But yes, it was the Abbasid period. Yeah? Any more questions? Yes, bro.
We talked about Al-Andalus in Spain and the Ottoman Empire. Both of them obviously experienced downfalls, and the empires obviously disappeared. So what lessons can we learn from that we can take forward?
That's it. You're absolutely right, brother. Jazakallah khair. First of all, indeed, as we said, history is not just there to learn some dates by heart and some battles, but we need to learn a lesson from everything that we learn. And indeed, every step that somebody made in the past could be of importance to us nowadays. And definitely one of this is the empires that existed. There were empires once. What happened to them? How come they disappeared? There is a very clear and logical, first of all, historically logical position. There is no empire in the history of humanity that lasted longer than 1,000 years. Okay? The longer lasting empire, the longest one of the longest ones was the Roman Empire. It never reached more than 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire, the East Roman Empire, which Allah talks about in the Quran, Surah Ar-Rum, the Romans, as is wrongly translated. Or, if you read, and that's why again, if you read the Quran, the tafsir of everything you read is important, and with the tafsir comes historical explanation. You will never be able to understand Surah Al-Fil without the historical background. You will never be able to understand Surah Ar-Rum without a historical explanation, because Ar-Rum, these were not the Romans, but they were actually the Greek Byzantine people. Okay, the East Romans. Rome once was divided into East Rome and West Rome. West Rome was Rome, as we know it nowadays, the capital of Italy, which had an empire in the west. And then East Rome, Constantinople, which was the whole southeastern Mediterranean area. Okay, going into Syria, going into the Middle East, actually. All this, that was East Rome. And when Allah talks in the Quran about Surah Ar-Rum and the Rumis, then He means the Roman, East Romans. That means the Byzantine Greek-speaking people, because they were a power at the time. West Rome had lost it to the barbarians already. So what we can learn from that is simple. One thing, there is never in the history of humanity an empire that lasted forever. Never. Never mind Muslim or non-Muslim, whatever. Second, so there's always a time, there's a peak point and there's always a downfall, always. Second, the downfall comes most of the times, if you look at the Islamic empires, it comes also with beautification of mosques, of making it more aesthetic, of, if you look at Al-Andalus, the last 200, 300 years in Granada, if you look at the beauty of Granada nowadays, you can go and visit, you can go to the Alhambra, you can go and see this place, beautiful, but you see also that the way that the mosques were designed was the last 200, 300 years that indicated that many people saw the mosques as a place of worship, but rather a place of beautification and art. And we know the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talking about the time that when it's the time that actually they use a mosque for beauty, and I'm paraphrasing now, of course, for beautification and not for worship, then we have a problem. And that's exactly what happened in Al-Andalus. With regards to the Ottomans, pretty much very close. The idea is the same. The Ottomans, when they started off, and many of us might be watching Ertugrul nowadays, Ertugrul is now coming, I heard, I didn't have the time to watch it unfortunately, but Ertugrul is coming to the point, I was told now that the birth of Osman is coming, right? I was told. So Osman, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, is now entering the stage. This is a totally different issue. I would like to know how it's going to end. But Ertugrul, the father of Osman, had no place in history until the series came up. Now everybody wants to know about Ertugrul and who and what. But Ertugrul was a chieftain. He came from Central Asia, was a nomad, and was leading a tribe. But they were Muslims. They accepted Islam, they were Muslims, and they accepted the Islamic practices. With him was, of course, Osman, his son, who not only was a Muslim, but he was the founder of the Ottoman Empire. And this in itself is grandiose, is fantastic in itself. After Osman, his son Orhan, who did he marry? He married 2 Byzantine princesses, Orhan. So everybody following then, after that, was actually of half Greek origin. I always make jokes when I speak to Turkish brothers. I'm like, well, the Ottoman Empire was basically a Greek empire. Okay? So if you look at, so the idea was, again, that time, that didn't play a role. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. It just absolutely didn't matter. But Islam played a role. And it didn't matter if they were of background Russian or Greek or Albanian. The Pashas, most of the Pashas in the Ottoman Empire were actually of Albanian origin. Most of the Pashas were of Albanian origin. And if not Albanian, then other Balkan countries. Okay? So that's why the idea of Turks is nonsense, because there were no Turks there. And none of the sultans would call themselves a Turk. Most of them had mothers who were not Turkish. Okay, Sultan Mehmed Fatih, who opened the Constantinople, one of the languages he spoke best was Greek, because his mother was Greek. And he respected ancient Greek civilization. When he opened Constantinople, he didn't allow anyone to destroy any temple or to do whatever they did, So, look at the Byzantine Empire actually hated the classical Greek civilization and wanted to destroy all temples and everything that was ancient Greek. Whereas the Ottomans did not do that. So, the second part of, let's say, the Ottomans, of why the downfall, simply because, next to it being the time for it, simply historically the time, they really moved towards the 19th century, towards the Tanzimat movement, the Reformation movement. They moved towards getting rid of Islam, actually. And it was not Mustafa Kemal Atatürk only. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was the last puppet. Everything before led up to him. Just simply led up to him. The sultans before, many of them were not much better. Okay? The dynasty, the Ottoman dynasty, the Ottoman Empire was nothing else but a dynasty. And if I have a son who is simply not capable to lead the Islamic Empire, then this son should actually not become the next ruler. But if I push him just because it's my son to become the next ruler, then that's already a recipe for disaster in itself. And that's what happened in the Ottoman Empire. Next to unity, the third point. There was no unity. I mean, it seems like a slogan that we say a lot. Yeah, but the truth is, as long as the Christians were not united, that made them weak and made the Muslims extremely strong. From the moment that the Muslims started being disunited and become weak, made the Christians strong on the other side. And that's why they could come down, if you remember the map, they could come from the north all the way down to Granada in the south within 700 to 800 years. A long period of time, but Shaitan is very patient. Right? So 3 main reasons, right? Problem of unity, disunity. Second, the Islamic element, which gets lost after a while because we're just too complacent and everything is fine. And the third, the historical reason, just simply after a while, any empire falls. Absolutely normal. This one.
The question I want to ask was...
Let the brother first, I think he wants...
Is out of topic. How did Islam come to India?
India, oh my goodness, that's a massive topic in itself, I think.
Just highlight.
Highlight. Very simple. First of all, India is a massive country. And with India, we're talking about the Indian subcontinent. We're not talking about just India nowadays. Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, the whole subcontinent. In the north, first of all, it started already during the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It started that time already. Ibn Abi Waqas, for example, he was sent to the north of India. So there was some kind of element of sending people out, as Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was doing already, to inform. 7th century, the exact year, I don't remember the exact year, I will have to check up for you, but it is the very beginning, during the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam already. Okay, so we have the very beginning already, during the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when all these emissaries were sent out to the Byzantine Empire, to India as well, to China and so on. Kerala, the south of India, for example, accepted Islam exactly the same way that Indonesians accepted Islam, through trade. Now, all these elements, this is now the highlights, right? So, there were emissaries in the north, and there were tradespeople in the south. Where is the sword? Where is the sword? As the Indian Hindus nowadays say, that Islam came by the sword, that the Muslims, they came from outside, the Arabs came and they fought us. Where is that? Nowhere. Nowhere. There's nearly no country in the world. No, there's not nearly. There's no country in the world that you can show me that there has been battles and Muslims won over non-Muslims and Islam became the predominant religion of faith in that country because of a battle. Nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world. In North Africa, when people say, for example, it was the Arabs who came to North Africa, which is true, they came to Egypt, up to Morocco. The Arabs never forced a Berber who was living there to become Muslim. Never. They became Muslim within 11 years. And within 11 years, that time, from the moment that the North African Berbers accepted Islam, the first thing that they did, they went to Spain, 711, Tariq bin Ziyad. Okay? India, no doubt about it. Of course, there have been battles that happened. But if you look at the Indian history of the Mughals, for example, who were Turkic origin, by the way, you're talking about, they were of Turkic origin, the Mughals. Okay? When they came and settled the Mughal dynasty, which was a dynasty again, they didn't come from Central Asia just like, whole people came, boom, we said now we occupy India. No. Okay? These were Indian people. Indian people who accepted Islam, and that's why the Mughals were ruling India over Hindus who were the majority and still are. So if the Mughals were such terrible people and the Muslims were so suppressive, there wouldn't have been any Hindus at all in India anymore. Just logic tells me that, as a non-Indian. It's just logic telling me that. So, roughly, India opened itself to Islam in the north through missionaries, in the south through trade. That's it. That's it. Oh yeah. This one. Oh yeah.
That was very enlightening. How do you change this understanding that you highlighted earlier on, focusing on nationalism that's around, to like valuing religion? Because all these points that were highlighted, they're really valuable only if you take religion serious to some extent. Otherwise, it's just basically
education. Education. Number one, listen, if we start educating ourselves, because I always have to laugh when parents come to the school and they say, the book is good for my children. Brother, the book is very good for my children. But it's too expensive for me. I can't pay it. I said, Akhi, £20. If you go to Tesco, what can you buy with £20? First. Second, education. If you educate yourself, and then your children, not the other way around. People think, let them get education. What about you? Are we educated as people, as parents? So we start with ourselves. You start with yourself. You have a task upon your close family. Are you married? Yeah. Okay, mashallah. Then you have a task for your family yourself. Your father, your husband. So that's where it starts already. And take care of that. Do not think of saving the whole world, but save yourself first of all. That's what Allah says in the Quran as well. Save yourself from the fire. So think of yourself first. There you have to be selfish. Okay? So education, that's the first thing. And you're absolutely right. And in education, you have to find out, first of all, what do we follow nowadays? You're right. You mentioned one of the biggest cancer in the Muslim world, nationalism. We have nowadays people, Bangladeshis hate Pakistanis. Indians hate Sri Lankans. Moroccans hate Algerians. What is that? What is that? One Muslim nation hating the other Muslim nation. One Muslim brother hating another brother. What are we talking about? If we start like this, if we have this going on, then mashallah, we're working nicely for the colonialists. I mean, we're doing already their job. They don't have to do anything. Right? So if we try to get rid of the idea of nationalism that has gone into our nations, our people nowadays, not nation, into our people, and we understand what the real nation is. The real nation is the ummah. When we understand that, that's when all these borders will fall automatically. We're not going to have to push them down. They're going to fall themselves, inshallah. So education, that's I think the main answer to that. Any other question? Any other comment? Well, if this is it, Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very, very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Yes, bro. Yes.
One question, present time, basically. Turkey now. What's your view on President Erdogan?
Turkey now is a nation, right? Since 1923, a new modern nation, the only secular Muslim country in the world. Okay, that has to survive. That has to somehow get rid of the 70 years of secularism. Okay, so that is the problem of Turkey at the moment. The Turks have a big issue at this moment, which brings many of them actually to a kind of identity crisis. Now, after the establishment of Turkey, the Republic of Turkey, we have, for the first time, there is a president nowadays in that Republic of Turkey who has seen that there is an identity crisis in his people, okay, and who has combined, and has been combining for the last couple of years that he has been on power, who is combining as much as he can, because it's not easy, as much as he can, a bit Islam, with that Republic, okay. Now, there is no doubt about it that President Erdogan has done a lot of good things for his people. And that's what he's there. He's there for his people. Let us not fall asleep and think that he's there for the rest of them. It's a nation. He's ruling his nation. He's a president of Turkey, not the president of the Ummah. Not yet. He's a president of Turkey. And he's doing a job for his people. And I believe personally that he's doing a good job for his people. But furthermore, for us to go crazy like we do, especially here in Britain, I just came from Germany yesterday, and with the conversation here, so many Turkish people down there. It's the same thing. We have this. There's a kind of wave of Turkish love nowadays here, okay, because of Ertugrul and because, of course, of President Erdogan being the only Muslim president in a Muslim country who has really done a lot for his people. Okay, but again, he has done a lot for his people. That's all he can do. We need to take this maybe as an example. It's fine. It's good to see that some good things are happening. But let's move on now. I mean, we have to look also into the rest of the Muslim world and what can be done from our side. What can we do individually? It's the same like what I told the brother, you are a father, you're a husband, you have an individual responsibility towards your family. Take care of your family, and then politics will follow, inshallah. Politics is very dirty. Yes, sir.
Sheikh, one last question. I missed the talk actually, so I just joined like after.
Okay.
I'm sure it's very interesting, but can I just ask? I mean, is there any chance of the golden age of Islam to return? Or what can be done?
Well, look, there are enough hadith talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah and towards the lead up to it. And if you read what's his name? Ibn Kathir. Exactly, Ibn Kathir, thank you. If you read Ibn Kathir, a translation even from Ibn Kathir about the end of, what is it in English called? The end of times or the end of days, something like this it's called. It's the end of times. Jazakallah khair. Then, mashallah, beautiful book. I read it some years back. It's beautiful. I read it twice. I find it fascinating. And it's in English. So there you will see, inshallah, these are authentic hadith. These are authentic reports. It's not some kind of fantasy. That there will be once a time that the Muslims will come up again, inshallah.
But what can we do right now to make that happen?
You have a family, don't you?
Yes.
Take care of your family and yourself. That's what we can do. No. It's very pragmatic, really. People think like, let's go out and protest. Yeah. You know. You understand what I'm saying? Really, you have more. Your family will benefit more from you being able to give your family in a small circle something through than going out and protesting in Westminster.
Yeah. So if like everybody does that,
Yeah.
the whole Ummah would rise and so on. Yeah. It makes sense. Thank you.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Yes. Jazakallah. Yes, sir.
The thing is, the question I want to ask was, so we have, before, like, when you talked about, assimilation and everything, right? Most,
Oh, yeah.
what do you call it, families around here would be, like, traditionally we're used to, like, isolation, and then, what do you call it, and the thing is, how do we get out of isolation to integration?
Okay.
Without getting assimilated?
Jazakallah khair. Really, that is a top question. After all this what we discussed today, I think this is the main thing that have to be discussed. We have three elements, okay, and especially in Anglo-Saxon society. We're living in an Anglo-Saxon country. The same problems occur in Canada, in the States, in Australia. The same issues. The Anglo-Saxon model says there in these ghettos you have Hindus. In these ghettos, you have Muslims. In these ghettos, you have black people, Caribbean people. In these ghettos, you have white people, and so on and so on. This is the Anglo-Saxon model. We all know you cannot just move within Britain. In London, you cannot just go and live in Putney. Right? Because you don't know when you get up next morning, what's going to happen to your car. That's just simply the Anglo-Saxon model. So we have to live in certain areas. You cannot just go to a white area, for example, whatever this might be. You know what I mean. We all understand what we're saying here. And because of that, we have developed kind of areas in the Anglo-Saxon world where we can let's call them Muslim areas. I don't like calling them Muslim areas because it's not entirely true. It's not a Muslim area, right? Because it's just simply not. What does it mean, Muslim area? But anyway, there are many Muslims who live there. This creates a type of attitude towards isolationism. Yes, so people try to isolate themselves from the rest of society because of the system already, but also many of us would like to have this isolationist approach because then my children could go to the madrasa, my children could go to the mosque, my children can go to the school close, we can, and then I meet up with auntie and with uncle, right? That's the approach that we have ourselves as well. Now, this we can just do here. You cannot do that in Germany, you cannot do it in France, because the system does not allow you that. So but now we have to work out the isolationist approach. Is this the right approach? Are we really supposed to stay away from society and live in our own little bubbles? Wake up in the morning, go to the masjid, mashallah, beautiful, go back home, you go to the madrasa, you go to the mosque, you might go to a work where 90% are Muslims where you work in and so on. What do you really participate in the society? What exactly do you give to this society and what does society give back to you? This is where integration comes in. And this is what I discussed before when I said, let's now think away from isolationism, let's look into integration. We have to integrate ourselves and our families and our children into the society and give society and take from society. And not just give to our certain little bubble and our little certain society that we have created. But we have to also go to Tesco shopping instead of going to auntie and uncle shopping. You understand what I'm saying? Which is because you come in interaction with non-Muslims, and you have to come in interaction with non-Muslims, guys. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong, do not misinterpret the hadith of don't be friends with non-Muslims. Does not mean that our children at school cannot have friends who are non-Muslims. That does not mean that. My friends, when I became Muslim, first when I was not Muslim, most of my friends were actually Muslims. And I didn't see Islam. Had nothing to do with Islam. But when I became Muslim later, I realized, of course, the people that you're hanging out with should be the people who are close to remind you of Allah, you go together to the masjid. Of course, that is part of it. And automatically you'll do that naturally. We will do that naturally. But that does not mean that you cannot have a Jim or a John or a James as friend, inviting him over, not on beer, but on cup of coffee. Right? They need to also know who you are. That is your part of it that you play. So isolationism is definitely the wrongest thing that we are doing in this country. Unfortunately, I have experienced it a lot. You know, you have really areas, isolation that you feel, and then you see children just really, they come from school, they go to madrasa with the Quran in their hand, they come back home, they go and eat next morning the same thing. And then the schools which they attend are 90% Muslim. You know, which if they are Muslim schools, makes it even more difficult. But if they're public schools, then you know you have to see how the reaction is with the outside society. We have to. It's difficult because it's part of the system. So I'm not saying it's easy. Whereas that makes it easier in Germany or in France. There you have to be automatically in contact with the system and with society, because you cannot be in a ghetto like here. You cannot isolate yourself there. It's not easy. Even if you wanted to, you cannot do that. They wouldn't allow you. So that is better from that perspective there. Okay? So we have to work on it. We have to just say, okay, I take my children and I go to the British Museum. I wonder here, how many of us have been to the British Museum in London? You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
So it keeps carrying on, but if we go to, there's two extremes here, right? One is the ghetto isolation.
Yeah.
The other one is
assimilation,
which is the kind of system that France and Germany, when they build a building on blocks, basically,
yeah,
they have to make sure there's a certain percentage of each one, so that
yeah,
there isn't their own culture. It's just
yeah,
like a mixture. That
yeah,
there's much more of assimilation there. So
yeah,
وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We are a just and balanced nation, so we can't go into isolation, we can't go into assimilation, we have to be in between.
The balanced way, yes, absolutely.
Have we figured out what integration?
But that's what I said before. You're absolutely right. It's not easy. It is not easy. I'm not saying it. I don't have we expect to get a formula now. Give me a formula. What to do? You know, that is not. It's sometimes even individually. It is an individual issue that we have to figure out how much integration do you want for yourself and your family. How much do you have to have, and how much do you want? They're two different things. What we have to have, there is no doubt about it, I think we all agree, that it's unacceptable living in this country where the official language is English, and I cannot communicate in English when I go out, right? That is already a problem. So there I think we all agree that if I have not learned English, my children do not know English, that is a problem already, right? Okay, so that is one point already. So if you see that already, then you see that, yeah, you need to learn the language of the country. That does not mean that you cannot teach your children Bangla, Urdu, whatever. No problem, because, hey, nowadays, how they're discussing in Europe the issue of bilingualism, multilingualism, that's amazing. You know, they say multilingual children are actually more intelligent than monolingual children. So there you go. So there's nothing wrong with it. I know people in Germany sending their children to an English-speaking nursery to learn English. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with learning more languages, right? But we do need to make sure that we do know the main language of the country, which is English, German, French, whatever it is, wherever you're living. Okay? That's point number one already. And I think we all agree there. So let's start in small steps and move on. And what I said before also is very important for us to come together, which is the most difficult part here now, getting all the Muslim Ummah, the one Muslim Ummah in London, exactly. Imagine now 1 million Muslims coming together. And we all sit and discuss, or we at least have somebody to represent us to discuss the issue of how far do we go with integration, and what does assimilation mean, and what don't we want. That is a massive undertaking. That is something I would love to sit down and maybe create something like a constitutional, a paper that tells the world, or at least London, that's what we as Muslims want. We want schools that follow the Islamic curriculum. What does that mean? It does not mean no mathematics and English and whatever. It just simply means that we want also Islam as a part of our curriculum. That's all. Okay? And so on and so on. What do I want and what should not we want? What shouldn't we want, actually? That's also something we need to put down. And definitely one of the point is this issue with the language. Because that's an issue, maybe not that much in England, but it is in Germany. There are many Turkish families in Germany, they don't speak German. Even second and third generation, you hear them speaking, children speaking to each other, and you're like, oh my God. You know, like, my goodness, go and do something, brush up on your German. You know, although you grew up in Germany, you're German, but you still don't speak the language. You see, so this is important, right? Yeah.
Well, on that basis, would it be better to send your child to a state school to integrate better, or that is a better?
Allah, really, it's a very difficult issue. Believe me, my children have gone to state schools. It's a very difficult, or are going still to state schools. It's a very difficult issue because indeed, you have to also see your, when you're living in London, it's more difficult than in Birmingham, for example. Birmingham is smaller. You can easily get in the morning to get your children to drop them off at school, whatever it might be. Here in London, my goodness, going from Ilford to City, you know it. You have to take the tube in the morning. It's complicated. It's more complicated. So you're looking into a school that's closer to you, right? So you're kind of forced sometimes to go to a school which is next door or not too far, simply because you need to drop off the children there. Okay? So the pragmatism speaks there again. So like, I need to go to a school where I'm able to drop off my children. So public or not public school. And if it is, the other thing, Islamic school, most of them you have to pay for. So honestly, I don't have 200, 300 pounds every month to be able to afford to pay for my children. And if you have 4, 5, 6 children, how can you afford this? That's an income that you have a month just for paying for the children. You see, so there are many points that are. It's really not just black and white. You have to really check everything. Oh yeah, but we have to stop here now because as I said, it can.